So it is with great honor, and I'm proud to call him my friend, to introduce Mayor Wellington Webb. I'm going to be doing a series of these interviews over the next couple of weeks. That's another thing. You probably got emails about this, but this is the first one that I'm doing. And I thought it was apropos to talk with Mayor Webb because, well, for a lot of different reasons. If you have never read this book, this is his memoirs, and it is a terrific, terrific read. It's an autobiography that he and a journalist from the Denver Post named Cindy Brovsky worked on together. And I don't know how you found the time to put this all together, Mayor, because this is very, very thorough. And it's a great read.
I'm working on a second one, just about done. I thought maybe the name of it should be What to Do When the Coronavirus Hits. Write a book. Here it is.
I think that's a good idea. Do you realize that Shakespeare wrote King Lear when he was quarantined during a plague?
Right. Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah. So, you know, and meanwhile, I'm learning how to do TikTok with my daughter.
This one even has a chapter in it. Is that I can't remember what name we came up with. It is You Can't Believe This blank. And it has in there items that I've found out over the years. I mean, one that's fairly common is that we had a former owner of one of our professional franchises whose name got caught up in one of these madam's little black books, and he got called into court.
Oh, yeah.
And then the judge asked him, have you know, a man of your stature, a man of your wealth, a man of your intellect, have you learned anything out of this situation? He said, yes, I have, Your Honor. Never write a check. So there's a lot of little tidbits like that in the book as well.
Well, and you've certainly shared with me a lot of really good common sense advice over the years. You know, for those who are watching and don't know, it was my great honor to serve as Mayor Webb's press secretary for 8 years, from 1995 to 2003, and I left a couple months before he was term limited. In Denver, you can only serve for 3 terms as mayor. And, you know, I'm just going to say this since I can say it publicly, Mayor. Thank you for that incredible experience.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
And I tell you what, the first couple of years, I woke up every morning looking in the mirror and I was like, is today the day he's going to realize I don't know what the hell I'm doing? But we just, you know, you kind of make it up as you go along, and I'm a jazz musician and I am.
Right. And you never know what's coming out. You never know what's coming down the pipe.
Every day the phone would ring and I'm like, okay, what's the crisis today? But, you know, one of the things I tell people is that when I worked for you, you were the calm in the storm. You were the calm in the middle of a hurricane. We could be facing a crisis. The city could be facing a crisis, whether it was Y2K, a police shooting, a snowstorm, uncertainty. But there's a level of calm that came from you, and it kept everybody grounded. And, you know, people who have read your book, they also know of, you know, your own personal tragedies you've experienced yourself. Can you tell me what's your compass in uncertain times? I mean, is it your faith? Is it your experience, your family, your age?
I think it's faith. I think it's family. And I think it's that I learned a long time ago, if the person that's in charge has to look like they know where they're going. If they don't, and no one will follow you. And also, you know, one of the things that Andrew, I shared with you, that I'm a big Andrew Cuomo fan. I met him, you know, years ago, early on when the Clintons, matter of fact, at one point we were being vetted for the same job, and I said I didn't want to do it, which was going over as Secretary of HUD. Is that you know what you're getting with Andrew. You know, and he's in charge, and people want to see someone's in charge that knows the facts. It's not political. He tells it like it is. You may not like it, but it's clear and it's fact-based. And I think we've always tried to operate that way in terms of being fact-based, and also in terms of trying to make sure we reach out to every neighborhood, every community, and leave no one untouched.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you say that about Cuomo. I'm not going to make this an entirely political commentary on stuff that's going on, but I think one thing that was just incredibly refreshing, and I think it was, the oxygen that I needed during all of this, was listening to the Queen talk. She gave a speech a couple of weeks ago, and it was kind of that British Churchill moment that, really came out and made me feel, even though, I'm not British, but it still gave me that sense of, we're all in this together. And I've not really felt that at the national level.
It's a British way, that stiff upper lip. It's the Queen did it. Churchill made it famous. After Dunkirk, saying that we'll fight them on the beaches, we'll fight them on land, we'll fight them on the sea. I think it's a part of leadership. One of the things I said earlier on I think it was an email that I applauded both Governor Polis and Mayor Hancock for working together. I think that is extremely necessary. Unlike the one news conference that both Mayor de Blasio of New York City was trying to take on Cuomo, the governor, which that fight lasted. That knockout was quicker than Muhammad Ali on Sonny Liston. I think it lasted one round. And it was clear that the governor's in charge, and that in this case, the mayor, even though New York City is the largest city, has to be secondary in terms of organizational infrastructure and power in order to get something done. And he also organized 3 states to do it together. So I think that's been good. I think we've also, Andrew, learned some things from this virus that we also, and I always tried to pride myself on trying to look ahead, that I look at things from a world view, global view. And I think that even when we look at locally, so much of this virus has affected Black and brown communities across the country. And they also have the fewest physicians. A year ago, 2 years ago, Colorado General Assembly, through the efforts of soon-to-be State Senator Janet Buckner and State Representative, soon-to-be State Senator James Coleman, had it, and Dominic Marino on the Joint Budget Committee put in $2 million to add for scholarships for minority physicians to work in minority neighborhoods to increase the health ability of those residents. And I don't know what happened to the $2 million, because I checked as well as others, a few months later, saying why, the bill passed by the legislature and its amendment to the Joint Budget Committee could not be adopted. But I was just thinking in retrospect, how much work, how much emphasis and effort, how helpful that could have been if they had been, if the state had been doing that for years. And it's my hope that I shared with James, because he's accustomed to the way I speak now, that you need to find out. It was obviously a John Dillinger raid because they took the money from the inside. It wasn't a Jesse James and Frank James. They didn't rob the bank outside. So where'd the $2 million go? And maybe now the $2 million should be $5 million, because we need more physicians and we need more minority physicians, and most minorities can't afford the cost of medical school. And I think we have an obligation to try to help fund that and reduce that cost, to put more minority physicians in the community.
Well, and that goes to also something that you worked on as a mayor as well, which we take for granted, that like in my neighborhood, I got a choice of about 4 grocery stores I can go to within about 10 minutes of my house. Low-income neighborhoods, the stores won't invest in the
right.
And for fresh vegetables, but fast food restaurants, they're everywhere, and it is that dynamic about, the health of low-income citizens that, starts with there, and whether there's even pharmacies available to get medicine. All of that stuff is incredible.
Right, right.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I agree. I mean, the other thing, I think we did that was ahead of our time when Donna Good worked a lot on this as well. I like to give credit where credit's due. Is that with Denver Health, we created a HIV clinic,
Yeah.
And we also created HIV dental clinic as well. And I think both of those were ahead of their time. And we're also buying a couple of apartment buildings to put young people in that were being transferred out of social services to let them have an adjustment period by living in independent living. This I think it was yesterday we published an op-ed. You young enough to remember War of the Worlds by Orson Welles?
Sure, yeah.
Or old enough. So Orson Welles did this radio show, which scared the hell out of most Americans because they actually thought, based upon the radio show, that that the planet was being invaded. So, I tried to write a kind of satire piece on what airports are going to look like if concessionaires don't get relief in this next stimulus package. Because what the Congress has done so far is that they have appropriated money for airlines, flight attendants, flight mechanics, but all those little places, when you get off the plane, I suggested the flight attendants are going to be, giving out go-to sandwiches for passengers getting off the plane because there's not going to be anything open. McDonald's is going to be closed, Burger King's Chick-fil-A is going to be closed, pretzel
and all those local restaurants that you fought for.
Yeah.
In local
all local stuff, Shoe Shine Parlor, anybody that has a concession airports is going down the tubes because they can't afford most of those 7-year leases, which are too short to begin with. Yeah. Can't make it because they don't make any money till the 6th and 7th year if they're lucky. And so now, because there's no passengers and no air traffic, 80% of United is down, not flying. So these people are going to actually go out of business in places across the country, whether it's Denver, whether it's Atlanta, whether it's New York or San Francisco. These airports are going to be empty, like they are now.
Well, and onto that issue, I'm dealing with a lot of and helping a lot of folks that are either on furlough or they've lost their job. They're eager to get back to work. What do you think it's going to take to reopen the economy?
I think it's going to be phased in. I think that we need a vaccine for this virus. We also need people to continue social distancing. I'm very much afraid of once people create certain behavior habits, of what happens with the symphony, what happens with the Nuggets and the Rockies. How do they get those crowds back if people are still fearful that the virus is still attacking people?
My sister, who's and my brother-in-law, who are in Utah in the symphony there, it's a question of whether the musicians are going to be able to sit next to each other.
Correct. Which is, same deal, right? Same deal. So one, you don't have participants that can play.
Yeah.
Number two, you can have audiences that can go and enjoy it. Yeah. And I think that's, and that is so much of our economy nationwide because people often, one of the food banks that Wilma and I gave money to were to the Restaurant Association for their angel fund to fund their food bank that was providing food for the restaurant workers, waiters and waitresses and chefs who can't work or have the virus to help provide some relief to them as well. But this pandemic is hitting everybody. Doesn't discriminate. There's no practice game on this. You're in it, and it's also it also starts changing your behavior pattern. I went to the bank a couple of weeks ago, and I was in line. I had my mask on. I had my blue surgical gloves on. There was a guy 6 feet in front of me, and he went up to the teller, and he coughed. I immediately got out of line, went and got in another teller line because I said at my age, and both the tellers at the bank started laughing. And they said, he's younger than you are. I said, but he looks older than me. So I'm not taking any chances on where that cough is going to end up. I'm going to make sure I'm as far away as possible so I can stick around a little longer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, it's like, it's important to think that way. And, as you know, my entire family got the COVID, as
Right.
my mother-in-law and my father-in-law. And, we're hoping, we're crossing our fingers that we are now immune from it. We don't know that for sure. And they're still trying to figure all that out. But let me ask you this, I remember when I was working for you, we had to do all of the intense planning for Y2K.
Right.
And that was basically planning for a cyber virus.
Right.
And we also had to rethink how we planned and responded after 9/11, after the Oklahoma City bombing. And there were tabletop exercises, and the Blackhawks were doing their routine testing around Denver and making sure that everything that we could possibly do to prepare for a terrorist attack and during the Y2K, make sure the world wasn't going to crumble because of these computer viruses. Do you think that the government was caught flat-footed?
Yes.
And do you also, do you remember, I mean, we talked about this earlier, you were the head of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, you were the head of the Conference of Black Mayors, and was the idea of a pandemic ever on the plate of leaders?
Not at that point in time. We were so focused in on dealing with Y2K, which most people don't even probably remember what that was at this point in time, because I know we also got criticism for not celebrating New Year's Eve the first year, because I said a baby's born, it's 1 day old, not 1 year old.
Right.
We did it 1 year later. But the tabletop exercises we were doing was more based upon Y2K and also based upon what happened with the World Trade Center. I remember when Wilma was at the Department of Labor, she also talked about they did tabletop exercises as well.
Yeah.
And they were for some health epidemics. And that's where, and at the time, I know there was a bitter internal strife between Denver Health and Environmental Health of having all of public health being within the city. And I chose to put public health at Denver Health, but I maintained the ability to quarantine with the mayor and within environmental health, because I thought it was important that judicially and organizationally that the ability to quarantine the city needed to come from the mayor.
Yeah.
But that in the same instances that the people providing most of the support on the ground for pandemics or anything like that needed to be health related. They weren't going. Americans are fairly independent, resilient, but pretty independent. Don't like being told what to do. But they also will listen much easier if they think the person telling them what to do has some authority. So, for example, if John Smith comes in and says, I work for the city and I want, we're going to put you over here, as opposed to if a medical physician or someone that's an MD is moving you in this position, I think it's the public responds much easier if it's a physician or a registered nurse or something like that.
Yeah.
So some of what we put in place, actually we've seen that Mayor Hancock has implemented was based upon our ability of what we put in place with the division of labor between environmental health and also the Denver Health Authority.
Yeah, it's astonishing because I mean, it's like, I'm just going to be honest. I was stupid about pandemics, and I mean, they were just kind of these things that happened in other countries, and they happened to, other parts of the world. And the idea that a virus could completely disrupt an economy the way that it is done, and I mean, but then you look back in history, and it's like, well, of course, it was inevitable. I mean, there was,
Right.
You could sit there and say, well, why weren't we planning for this, or why wasn't the federal government on top of this? And I've read some of the history of George Bush, who read a story. He read a book about the 1917 Spanish flu.
Spanish flu.
And immediately, put a group together to say, look, this is real. This is, even though we don't know it's not going to happen on January 1, even though, we've not experienced it at the degree that other countries have, it's a very real possibility. So it'll be interesting to see, after we look at this, what we do in the future.
Well, this also, this staying at home, this shelter in place also changes some of your behavior pattern. Because at one point, I went through all the World War II movies, tired of that. And so now to another genre, burning up Netflix. And then you still start like, I need something else to do, So then I started walking. Then I came home and I said, well, what would I look like without my mustache now? I haven't done that in 50 years. So then I debated whether I should cut my mustache off. Wilma said, "Oh, please, God, no, don't do that." I said, "Well, only reason I stopped, I might not recognize myself when I get up to go shave in the morning." But you start thinking about things, and you also start calling people, which I think some of this has also given us the opportunity to get closer to people that we care about, and give them calls, and say, just checking on you to see how you're doing.
Yeah,
because I think we've gotten away from that. So I think that's been helpful.
we've had a few national Zoom conference calls with cousins and family members, and we're all looking
Right.
like Hollywood Squares and the Brady Bunch up there on the screen.
Yeah.
We've had all kinds of stuff like that. Let me ask you about your history and your career, because I know a lot of people are interested in kind of understanding your perspective and how you got into government. But before I do that, I meant to ask you this earlier. Who are your leadership role models? Who did you look to as folks that you really admired in terms of leadership?
My grandmother, Nelson Mandela, and Frederick Douglass.
Okay. Why your grandmother?
She had a set of values that were very clear, and she passed those on to the next generation and the generation after that, in terms of her expectation level of how to carry yourself with dignity. Also, what's important of how to she felt education was like what Malcolm used to say, passport to the future. So early on, she was a graduate of Dillard University. She died when she was 86, 87, something like that. So back in 1977. So when she went to Dillard, that was one generation after slavery, and things were very difficult then. And she also, so she had a sense of that Southern gentility, but she also had a firmness. So to give you an example of just those listening, after high school, she always had, because she always wanted everyone to go to college.
Yeah.
Get a degree to be competitive, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And her girls were not successful in that arena. So her 4-point rule was, after graduation from high school, you had 4 choices. First one, you go to college. If you chose not to go to college, you go in the service. Any branch, okay. Third one is you pay her for staying in her house monthly for the room that you have. And she added on for public service and for telephone.
Yeah.
Then she said you were sucking up her air in the house. And then lastly, you could leave.
Yeah.
And she gave you 10 days to make your decision. And so,
I tell you what, it's one of those.
Her dignity deal was, no matter how much money you had in your pocket, or if you didn't have any, you always carried yourself like you had $1,000 in it, and nobody is better than you.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny when I describe you and I describe, what you were like as a leader, I always say it's kind of that quiet, unspoken dignity that exists in terms of how you handled situations and how you carried yourself. I do want to share one story. You probably don't remember this, but I do. I went to Manual High School, just like you did. And my parents, they sent us on voluntary open enrollment before busing started. They wanted us to be in schools with kids that were different colors than us. And, but I remember about the first couple months I was working for you, and Bobby Bogans and Laura Tinnen were driving one early morning. And Bobby, and for those who don't know, Bobby and Laura are both African American as well. And there was a rotating group of undercover police officers that run the mayor's security detail, and they just both happened to be on it that day. And hold on, I'm going to admit somebody else into the conversation. And so we had an early morning hit at Channel 9. It was an early morning interview, and it was probably like the 6 a.m. news or something. And, you know, I'm all of 26, 27 years old. And we drive up to the station, and I said to Bobby, I said, go around back. I said, I got the key code to the door in the back. And he keeps driving, and I hear some conversation up front a little bit, and then I hear this laughing. And they're kind of chuckling, and then all of a sudden you started laughing. And then all of a sudden all three of you were just busting a gut. And so I said, all right, I'm not in on the joke. What's going on? And you put your hand on my knee and you said, Andrew, call over to Channel 9 and tell them the day of black folks going through the back door ended about 25 years ago. But you explained to me, I mean, some people might think that that's silly. But you explained to me that, you know, when you were growing up and you were on a vacation or you were traveling, they wouldn't let you into the hotel at all. And if you did, you'd have to go through the back door.
Even if you were on the train, you had to move from the front of the car to the back of the car if you were on a train going south.
Right, and that's in your lifetime. I mean,
that was in my lifetime, yeah.
I mean, to me, it was like that's kind of a foreign experience, not only because I'm white, but because at that point, you never think about that. But that was an important lesson for me to learn.
Yeah, Mike Dino had that same experience. When they passed out a lot of posters saying that we were going to allow all these homeless people in at Lowry, and it was going to tear the neighborhood down. So they had about 1,000 people at George Washington came out to hear me speak about that under the McKinney Act, that federal government, that homeless shelters had the first cut. So Catholic Archdiocese, Colorado Coalition for Homeless, we were all trying to cut a deal with them in terms of measuring how many homeless facilities we were going to have at Lowry. And so Mike was saying, you want to go through the back? And I said, no, I'm going to go right through the front of the crowd, from the back of George Washington Auditorium up to the stage. He said, there's some angry people out there, about 1,000. I said, that'll be fine. We don't go through the back. We don't do that anymore.
Yeah, no, it's an important lesson, important for people to remember and to hear that. So tell me, I know you went to Manual High School, then you ended up going to Sterling, to Northeastern State. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, and then you ended up going to Greeley and getting your master's degree. Is that all chronologically correct?
Master's, right.
Yeah. And then you started your job working with troubled teenagers, right?
Yeah, I ended up, I wanted to be a school teacher, and then that didn't turn out as I had hoped. And then I ended up working at Fort Logan Mental Health Center. So I think, you know, God prepared me for all of the experiences I ended up. So I went from public school to dealing with regular classrooms, to dealing with special ed kids, to dealing with going to a job opportunity center, which gave me the opportunity to work with disadvantaged folks and meet some people that would later become very important in my life. That's the first time Valdez and I met. It was also time Corky Gonzalez and I met. And then after that, I started teaching at both. I was on the faculty for both CU Denver Center as well as CSU. And then I decided, I got the political bug and had the right partner, had the right spouse. Wilma was supportive. She shouldn't have been, given the fact that we had been married only that time 6 months, and she had 2 kids, I had 2 kids, and we put 4 kids together. It was not like the Brady Bunch on TV. They were all different. They were all different. It was hell on wheels at times, but we loved them all dearly, and they all did well. So I brought that kind of experience of having background of having spent time with relatives in the South, having time spent with my dad in Chicago and my aunt and uncle and Gary, as well as my grandmother in Denver, who had moved from New Orleans to Chicago to Denver. And so all those experiences, and I've always said that one of the reasons that 4 people have been elected mayor from Manual High School, Michael Hancock, Wellington Webb, Apache Joe Hilliard in Georgia, and Norm Rice in Seattle, is because Manual was so integrated at the time of whites, Latinos, Black, and Asians, that it wasn't unusual for you to be able to have those ethnicities in a classroom, and the level of comfort that you had after leaving school to be able to campaign in any of those particular neighborhoods.
Yeah, yeah. It was that way, you know, at a different level when I was there. I mean, we were still it was still a busing deal, and you know, all the kids from Crestmore and Hilltop were bused to Manual. And then I was actually supposed to go to George, but there was a band teacher at Manual named Hugh Avis that got me excited.
Right.
About the music. So, and then Miss Davies, Joyce Davies, the choir teacher there.
Right.
Miss Martin in theater. I mean, there's really just a great amount of teachers. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but
well, let me tell you when I knew Manual changed. Knew Manual changed when the basketball team came in about 5th, and the swimming team and the golf team and the tennis team came in 1st in the city.
Right.
I knew the student body had changed considerably.
Well, our football team got to the playoffs one time when I was there. Just one time, and we lost in the first round. But it always had great music program.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, a lot of people don't realize, I mean, you've run for office several times for state rep and auditor, but a lot of people don't realize you actually, your first time running for mayor, you didn't make it into the running.
No, I came in. It was a silly thing on my part. My ego got out of control. I ended up finishing, which given who else was running, the district attorney, the mayor, Federico Pena, the eventual winner, myself, Monty Pasco, who was a powerhouse in the business community, and 3 other people. And I ended up coming in 4th, spent the least amount of money. That's also when I decided to cut off my goatee. And I also decided that I was going to take another shot, but it would be different because I had not thought through what I was trying to do in terms of the run for mayor. I always believed we would have a minority mayor, and to Federico's congratulations to him, because he was able to put together the kind of coalition that could beat Dale Tooley and Bill McNichols, because McNichols was seen as tired. The big snowstorm knocked him out, and the city was changing. The city was changing. And, you know, same way I think this next election for mayor is going to be quite different too, because of the campaign requirements are going to be, you know, you're not going to have as many big spenders being able to send in those $2,000, $3,000 contributions. It's going to be much more even keel in terms of who has the ability to reach out and develop a broad coalition.
Now, running for mayor, and I've told this to job seekers all the time, that's the ultimate job interview. I mean, every day for months, you're being asked questions, your positions are being scrutinized, and then ultimately you have this big group of people known as citizens who are deciding whether or not you get the job. Do you think running for office today is a lot different than when you were running, let's just say for mayor the first time?
I think it's quite different. We were the forerunners of running for mayor with the canvassing door-to-door campaign. Thanks to Ken Smith and son Keith Thomas, who said, you know, a lot of people still don't know you. You need to get out and be knocking on doors, which we did. Nowadays, it's so much social media, but I still think the canvassing still works. But given this, you know, Corona epidemic, I think now it's so much vote by mail. It's so much more analytical. I think some of that I miss, because, you know, the other thing about running for office, you also have to have a sense of humor. If you don't have a sense of humor, people are pretty authentic, and people can tell, you know, when you're lying and when you're trying to bullshit them. they can see right through that. You know, some some of the Greg Colomets and I knocked on this one guy's door. I think I told you this story. And, you know, we were out in Harvey Park, and I knocked on the door, and my rap was always, "My name's Wellington Webb. I'm running for mayor." And he opened the door and locked the screen, and Greg said, "Oh, this is gonna be a bad one." And I said, I told him my spiel, and then he said, "Hey, Mom, that color fella I'm voting for is on the front porch." And then Greg, he was really said, "Did you hear what he called you?" I said, "Yeah, and it's just fine." He said he was voting for me, and so is his wife. So we'll correct terminology later. So we kind of laughed it off. Then Greg said, "You think he wants a sign?" I said, "No, he doesn't want that to be out that far out front." But those kinds of things, you know, if you're not walking, communicating with people, you know, Andrew, we stayed in a homeless shelter one night, and this one guy came up, and "I know who you are. I know you." And finally, he said, "But I'm not going to tell anybody you're in here, because you must be in here for some special purpose or something." I said, "Well, yeah. Well, who do you think I am?" He said, "Floyd Little." I said, "Well, yeah, that's me. I'm Floyd Little." And so I stayed in the homeless shelter. We took our own bed in, so we weren't taking the bed away from anybody. And so it was.
Well, and, you know, that's the thing I appreciate. I mean, I was not part of that campaign. I started during your second term, but the stories are just legendary. And I think one of the things I most appreciate about your run for mayor in '91 was that you started at 6% in the poll.
7%.
You were the city auditor, and you were running against the sitting DA.
Right.
I mean, there was others, but then that was the runoff election. And the DA had all the money. He had the support of the business community. He was flashy. And, you know, I'm always telling job seekers that when you feel as if the cards are stacked against you, you need to think about doing something different, you know,
right.
And getting out of your comfort zone and trying and mixing it up. And your campaign was literally running out of money. And
no, we did run out of money.
Yeah.
We did run out of money. Matter of fact, Mike Dino and Charlotte Stevens came over the house and told Wilma, "I think we should shut the campaign down and then reopen." And Wilma told him, "Wellington's out walking." She said, "If you shut it down, you'll never reopen it." And she was right. But I cried the night of the primary when we got in with 30%. Don Bain had 27, and Norm had dropped from 67 to 47. Yeah. So I always felt if it was one-on-one, I could beat Norm or I could beat Don Bain. But my greatest fear was that I would come in third and not be able to run at all. And so I had a lot of tears the night of the primary. No tears election night.
You know, your brand ended up becoming the tennis shoe mayor. I mean, because how many days straight did you walk? 90 days or something?
Yes, 42 days, 300 miles. The only time Mike Dino and I thought we were going to cheat, I don't know if Mike thought about it. Yeah, sure he thought about it. They scheduled us wrong. We were staying in Southmore Park, and we had to walk down to Trinity Church on, I think, about 16th and Grant.
That's like 12 miles.
And then walk back from 16th and Grant back to Southmore Park. And we were both so tired, we got to Yale and Monaco. We just sat on a curb. And a guy comes by in a car and sees us and then stops. He opens the door and he says, "Webb, you need a lift?" And then he closed the door. He said, "That's right, you walking, you can't get a ride." And then drove off. And then Mike and I looked at each other and laughed. And so I think we walked down some alleys and backyards trying to get back over to Southmore Park to get some rest.
I think that might have been the same guy you told me about on the day of the election. You were out on a corner waving a sign, and there's a guy in a pickup truck, and he's looking at you, and he's hitting the gas and looking all threatening, and the light turns green, and he looks out the window and starts giving you guys the bird, and then promptly crashed into a telephone pole.
Yeah. He didn't understand. My corner was just like any of the girls that worked the night shift. I had a corner, and I didn't want anybody else on it.
So 45 days straight, walking through every neighborhood, sleeping at supporters' homes, the homeless shelters, the fire stations, anywhere that would take you, and it was the game changer. And on top of that, the other reason you had to walk is because the media they were checking in on you to make sure you didn't cheat, which was which
Right.
was a good thing on one hand because you were getting a lot of free earned media.
We got $500,000 worth of free media, and a lot of reporters ended up walking further than they had anticipated, because that's not normally what they do. But
Yeah.
they were walking just to see. And so now, Andrew, now everything has changed, and I think some of that's for the good. I hope that other states follow us on this vote by mail. It really worked in Wisconsin. I hope that that we have a national vote by mail and that they pass Klobuchar's bill.
I don't see why they shouldn't. I mean, unless they're trying to oppress voters. I mean, that's the
Well,
bottom.
they are trying to suppress voters, but I hope that we'll be able to vote by mail. Let me share with you the last comment that I want to share. One of the things I've learned since Wilma and I've been doing this shelter in place is that, we still get calls from people that need help. And so I found in this one instance what I call the perfect crime, kind of, so to speak. Now, let me just lay out the case, and then you can let your voters, your people that are zoomed in. I found a teenager calling and said, I got a call from a lawyer that said that she was calling me because my cousin had died, and but they had taken me out of her will, and that she just wanted to give me advance notice. And I said, well, why was she calling you? And I said, well, how old was your cousin? She said 97. And she said, but I looked up that she's 97 and she just took out a reverse mortgage for 60 years for $900,000.
Wow.
And I said, well, who are the, well, no one 97 years old gonna take out no mortgage for no 60 years. That's ridiculous. Who are the executors for her estate? And she said the insurance agent.
There you go.
Insurance agent and a finance guy. And I said, well, there needs to be a law written or something that if you're an insurance agent and you're writing a policy, that you can't then automatically become the executor of someone's estate who passes. There's something wrong with that story. And they probably will get away with it because they got a will signed, had a couple of neighbors sign it, and then we looked, and the two executors got about 40% each, and one neighbor got 10%, and they gave 10% to the Humane Society. Just the whole thing just reeks of,
Well, and you know what?
There's a place to help people like that.
But the other thing about that, and I remember when I was traveling with you a lot to these U.S. Conference of Mayors, and I got to have the honor of sitting with a lot of mayors. One of the questions I would always ask them is, why did you run for office? What was the reason? And so many of them, the catalyst was an issue like that, where they were so pissed off that something was so wrong that somebody had to do something about it. And it might have been running for the school board, it might have been running for a county commission, or it might have been running for the city council, or whatever it was. But it's issues like that that get people engaged and upset enough to say, look, I'm gonna run for office. I mean, what advice would you give for people today who want to run for office?
If they really want to make a difference, and they have the tenacity and the intellect to analyze the issues that are going to come before the legislature or the city council or where county commissioner, that they have to go out and make their case to the people. And if you don't succeed the first time, take another shot at it. Everybody doesn't have to be elected to serve. A lot of people can serve in many different ways.
Yeah.
But for me, I thought being elected was one way that I could make a difference, because I grew up on 32nd and Williams. And if I called the chairman of Wells Fargo to come meet with me, I don't think he's going to show up. But if I chair the banking committee in the legislature and ask the chairman of Wells Fargo, I think he'll show up. So yeah. I think you have to use, know your authorizing environment and use your ability to bring about change. And I think there's some legislators down there that have been very aggressive in making changes and changing the law. And I think the other part is important, is to be able to work both sides of the aisle. And that you also have to be a supportive family. I was disappointed that we had to cancel the Democratic dinner, because I had a piece in there on Wilma saying that I know for a fact that if I got elected mayor because I had Wilma on my side, and the same thing as auditor and state rep, because we came together as a team. And you have to have supportive family to be able to have success.
Well, I tell you, one of the things Jim Martinez and I always talked about, and he was, you know, another one of your key guys in that first campaign, and he started out with you in the auditor's office.
Right.
He said, and I totally believe this, that one of the game changers in your first campaign was the debates. And
right.
The debates, it became very clear, and I think that both of the newspapers started to recognize this as well, is that you came so better well prepared. And you were prepared in a way that it wasn't like you went and that you went and crunched the books. You were prepared in the way that you knew the city. You authentically understood the neighborhood. You understood the politics of it. But I mean, you even knew the bus routes. I mean, you knew the city better than anybody else, and that was a real game.
Yeah, I always looked at it from the standpoint of, Joe Sixpack, the guy that's just sitting there and always cynical and critical of government anyway. And so when they stop you, they want to know, well, when you're going to fix that pothole. I saw some of the numbers of what they're doing now. We were doing like 150,000 potholes a year, and the cost of a pothole and being able to shovel snow in residential areas as well as in main corridors. That I thought people wanted to make sure that if they paying taxes, they want to make sure they're getting their money's worth. So I was also amazed that, we also said that our Sarco plant should disappear out there in Globeville. Yeah. And we said that, and people said we were daydreaming. That was never going to happen. I went out there now and I noticed that our Sarco plant is gone. And people said, well, how do you even know where that was? I said, when we first came to Denver, for the first month, we stayed in the Globeville projects. And I can tell you how long it takes to walk from the Globeville projects on 55th down to Westerkamp's grocery store down there on North Washington and back up with groceries in both hands. Right. And, so, you can be authentic by using your own experiences and try to not lose your sense of humor at the same time.
Well, and I'll tell everybody out there, and this is honest to goodness, and I know Jim Martinez could tell you this, and other members of the staff. There are numerous times when we'd be driving with you to events, and you'd have the security pull over, and you'd call Public Works and say, look, there's a big chuck hole right here on Broadway and 17th that needs to be fixed. Or if you saw graffiti on the side of a building, or, I mean, it was not just a job where you sat at City Hall making decrees and orders. You were out in the community making sure, and as someone who loved the city and as a citizen of the city, you were someone who actually, this was a very active role you played.
Andrew, one of the things, we also tried to have fun with it. Yeah. I think Jim told you that one day we found a Public Works truck parked in the alley downtown, and he left the key in it. And so we got in and we moved the truck. So we moved the truck 4 or 5 blocks away, and then I took the keys back with me to the mayor's office. And and the moral of the story is, if you're driving a city vehicle, you don't leave the keys in the car or in the truck. And
or park blocking an alley.
Blocking an alley. So he came back, So So again, it's about having fun. But I think they're a good crop of elected officials now. Obviously, some better than others. I worry about what reapportionment is going to do to the next crop of elected officials. I think the Democrats sold out on this. They got worried about one name gerrymandering. Republicans wanted to change the boundary lines because in the last reapportionment, the votes were 6-5. Yeah. And the districts that most people ran from, so the Leslie Harrods, the James Colemans, the Adrian Benavides's, the Joe Salazar, so many of those, we drew those districts. And now I told James Coleman his district could end up in Colorado Springs, because what they put together was some asinine committee saying that no one can have any experience and no one can have any knowledge of the of how reapportionment and boundary lines work. The Black community is desegregated to the point the Voting Rights Act doesn't count. As some people suggested, that would provide protection. There is protection for some of the Latino population because in many cases they're still congregated. But I think we don't know what this is going to look like 2 years, and this fits right into the whole idea of voter suppression and taking away from voter legitimacy. We had a good commission. Morgan Carroll was on it. We just had a good commission that 10 years ago. And even Mario Nichols, who was a Republican conservative, and the lines that were drawn really reflected the state in that they were seats that only Republicans could win, seats only Democrats could win, and then there were seats that were very competitive.
Let me ask you this. And I say this more at the national level, but it's also trickling down to the local level. Do you recognize the parties anymore?
Not really.
I mean, it's a very, I mean, I'm very open-minded, and I know my progressive friends, and I totally get where they're going in terms of, you know, universal health care and the things of that sort. But it used to be about winning elections too.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's why they call me a moderate. I used to be, when I first started out, if you look at the bills I introduced, I would have been the progressive, given the fact that I introduced the first prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and passing a bill saying prohibiting discrimination on physical disability in many of those bills. So it's about whether you want to make a statement about the bill, because sometimes the bill takes a while to catch up with the general public, or whether you want to have control of the legislative process. And I think that the one and most dangerous aspect is, given my point of view, the president's ability to appoint another Supreme Court judge if something happens to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The court's already in bad shape from the Supreme Court all the way down to the lower court judges that are so conservative that it's going to take a long time before this changes. Yeah. But you know, we went through this before when the Supreme Court ruled that it was okay to segregate.
So I'm going to finish this up because I know it's getting to be in about an hour, but one of the stories you tell is, and I think it was your second time attempt at running for mayor when you won in '91, but you were wavering about whether to run for mayor. And, you know, your wife, Wilma, herself a political veteran who I admire, you know, incredibly. She gave you some common sense advice. And she says, there's one way for sure you won't win. Don't run.
Right. Right.
And I always remembered that advice when, like, even when I started my own business, I was scared to death. I had Wilma's voice in my head. You're certainly going to fail if you don't even attempt it.
You got to take a shot at it, right?
Yeah.
You have to shot at it, and that's why I say Wilma has been and it's been so supportive over the years. But you also have to enjoy doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
You have to have fun at it. And because if you're not having fun at it, you're not going to be successful at it.
Yeah. Okay, so quick lightning round. Favorite Western movie?
Oh, I can't limit it to one. If I had to pick one, it'd probably be Tombstone with Val Kilmer playing the role of Doc Holliday.
Yeah. High Noon was good too, though.
High Noon with Gary Cooper and yeah, that was a great movie.
All right, what's your favorite sports team?
Favorite sports teams?
Yeah.
Present sports team?
Yeah.
Oh, Denver Nuggets.
Okay.
Denver Nuggets. I'm a Denver Nugget fan, but I tell you, I loved Kobe, because I said anybody that is that competitive at that young has to be special.
Yeah.
Has to be special.
Yeah. What's your idea of a perfect night out in Denver?
A perfect night out in Denver?
Uh-huh.
A perfect night out in Denver for me would be going up to one of my favorite restaurants up at, it'd probably be going up early and watch the sunset at Red Rocks. And matter of fact, I told Wilma one day, we were sitting at Red Rocks, and I said, you know, I'm going to be mayor of that one day. And we just sat up there, and she said, people are going to think you're crazy. I said, I know. Some people think I'm already crazy. But we're going to do this.
Yeah.
So I start out at Red Rocks, sunset, and then I drive over to the fort. And then I'd start out with some margaritas and also those peppers with the peppers with the peanut butter inside.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you got to take the seeds out of those before you.
Yes. Yeah. Right. So the question now, you know, as we come back after this this coronavirus is, you know, how many of these restaurants going to still be able to make it? I never dreamed that the Palm would close. I never dreamed that the Brown Palace would close its doors and then reopen at a future time.
The Racine's is closing.
Racine's is closed. I mean, it's
the market is closing down in Limerick Square. Did you hear that?
Yeah. No, I did not. I mean, so many people are out of work from this, and it's going to be imperative that people can go back out and shop, but they can't go out and shop if they don't have jobs and don't have money coming in. And I learned this from talking to some of my concessionaire friends, that there's a big difference between the layoff and the termination or furlough. So if you get furloughed, you're probably still getting health benefits. Yeah. A lot of concessionaire owners at the airports have had to terminate people and let them draw unemployment because they can't continue to pay health benefits.
Yeah.
And they may end up having to work in their own locations just to keep the doors open.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. You know, it's true. I was telling my wife last night, we were talking about this, and we got 2 little kids, and we got a college student here who they're all doing their stuff online. And, you know, it's actually, for me, I work from home.
Right.
So getting my family home all the time is actually been a beautiful thing. But I told her, I said, you know, I'm not scared of the future. I'm scared of the uncertainty.
Right.
That's the thing that really that I have a hard time with. But on the other hand, and I learned a lot of this from you and just my own experiences as well, even in, you know, my darkest days, which haven't ever been that dark, I still have this unabiding optimism that it's going to get better.
Right.
I know that it will, and it might be different, but you know, there could be some ingenuity that comes out of this. You know, we might be working from home a lot more as part of this, and
sports teaches you that as well, as you stick with the plan and you stick with the play that's been drawn up.
Yeah.
Even if you think you're better, you may be, but one person can't be 5. You know what I mean? So you stick, you stick with the play that's drawn. I think it's and people will follow that so long as they have faith in the leadership, and the leadership has continued to demonstrate that they're not going to ask anybody to do something that they're not willing to do for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anything else you'd like to say? I mean, this has been a delight. I really appreciate you taking the time out to do this, and it's meant a lot to me. And I know and it's been live on Facebook, live on Zoom, and I'll post this out a little bit later. But I think a lot of people here really appreciate hearing your voice in these times.
Well, I tell you, one way that people can help is Wilma and I are trying to decide what we want to do with our next allotment of dollars that we want to put out to help for those that have been hit with this coronavirus. Because our first thought was that the one thing that everybody needs is food and shelter, and we don't know how to do the shelter part, but we know how to deal with trying to keep certain that food banks their shelves are plentiful. So if people have ideas in terms of some specific charities, they have to be 501c3 designated. So that
there's a lot of good things going on out there. I mean, people that are trying to help workers, and you know, a lot of the jazz clubs I play at, they're doing stuff from.
So I was surprised that you mentioned that you didn't know that I had a jazz side too when I was young.
I knew a little bit, but yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
you're
yeah.
legit. I mean, you're like the real deal about jazz.
Well, I mean, you know, people go through different stages in life. That's, you know, I went through that one stage early on when I was in Chicago and Gary, and that's when I went through my, you know, jazz. Scotch was a drink that time. It was primarily Chivas Regal, or Cuddy Sark. And then I even had my hair straightened some to change my hairstyle, which was kind of funny because when I went up to Northeastern, I drove directly from Gary to Sterling. And Julesburg, 80 splits off. It goes 80 and then I think it's 25 or 76, one of them. And I went into Sterling, then I had, my hair was straight. Then when I came back up to school, then I had a covada, so all the hair was cut off. So the coach was looking at me like, is that the same guy I talked to 2 weeks ago? But yeah, those early years of listening, you know, to folks like John Coltrane and folks in the Miles Davis group, you know, Cannonball, Philly Joe Jones, Paul Chambers, Cannonball Adderley.
Oh, well, the fact that you actually see them and hear them.
Right, right. And Wayne Shorter and Lee Morgan, that was just halftime entertainment.
And Ahmad Jamal.
I think we're fading out, Andrew.
I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but it looks like, well, let me see here. Do you remember when we were in London and we went to Ronnie Scott's, which is like the top jazz club in the world? Do you remember when we went to Ronnie Scott's in London?
Yeah, yeah. Princess Di used to hang out
we
there.
Saw Marcus Roberts.
Right. Ronnie Scott's in London, because they had some good jazz in London. And Wilma and I did the same thing in Paris. That was pretty special.
I'm back. You still there?
I'm still here.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, I don't know what was going on, but we saw Marcus Roberts, who was the blind piano player in one of the Marsalis brothers.
Right.
He was playing drums. And then, but the funny part was we're in the middle of London, and you ordered a margarita, and they had no idea how to make a margarita.
I remember that.
I think they told me it was like pure sweet and sour with nothing else, and but it was a fun time. And that's also when we went to the caves. Remember the World War II Churchill caves?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was special. That was special.
I mean, you're a big student of history. Well, anyway, thank you all for attending this. Like I say, we're going to have more sessions. The next one is coming up on Friday with Linda Sollers, and she's going to talk about reinvention. She's a reinvention expert. She's excellent. She's fantastic. And then I'm going to have my wife on next week talking about working for nonprofits. We have Liz Ryan, who is a former opera singer turned career expert, and she's funny and she's raw and she's legit. And then we also have Janine Vandenberg, who's going to be talking about ageism and job seeking after the age of 50. And then we're going to have Deborah Fine, who wrote the book, The Fine Art of Small Talk, and helping people learn to talk confidently about themselves. So thank you all for being here, and thanks a lot. I really appreciate it, Mayor Webb. We'll talk real soon.
All right, Andrew, best to you and best to the family and best to everybody that tuned in. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.